Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And I just want to thank you for taking the time to watch this. And thank you for dealing with some of the hiccups of starting something out and dealing with me as I'm growing in how to do photo editing and working with the sound and just everything in general that goes with this. I really appreciate all your support. Please be sure to leave feedback, likes, share, that kind of stuff, as that will help grow the channel, but then also help me get some tools, hopefully, to continue to improve what I'm doing. I'm working very hard every week to try to improve all aspects of the show. So thank you so much. I hope you learn a lot from my following guest. Hey, what's good, everybody? Indrid here with another episode of Behind the Avatar. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am really excited to have my next guest because he really highlights skills that don't even come close to my personality. And so I cannot wait to bring you this interview because I know I'm going to learn a lot, which hopefully means you're going to learn a lot. So I have Josh Gauntlet. Is it Burry or
It's
Bury? I
Bury,
didn't
yeah.
ask. Okay, Burry.
It's Bury.
I
Yes,
forgot to
thank you for
ask.
asking. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
That's good.
so Josh Gauntlet Burry. Currently, you are a freelance writer with theScore, and you've done some copy editing. You've done some other reporting,
Yeah.
and I see that you were a staff writer at a couple different places. So definitely have a depth of knowledge in journalism and writing, and you majored in journalism. So thank you so much for being on the show, Josh. Anything you'd like to add or say about who you are?
I think that's a pretty good summary. I am a freelancer, like you mentioned. I mostly freelance for theScore at the moment. I have done freelancing for other companies and whatnot in the past, though. But yeah, if you watch a cool video on theScore esports, maybe it was written by me. Should be in the description at least. So.
Okay, cool. So part of what we're trying to do with this show, since it is so early, I'm letting people know, is tell people's story about how they got into esports. And so in my mind, I think a great place to start would be college. And so, or it might even be earlier for you. You majored in journalism. When did you know you wanted to major in journalism?
So I was, yeah, earlier is actually a little bit better just to give some context.
Okay.
So I had worked at a few call centers and whatnot. I was just working there as my now wife was going to university, and I was just trying to pay the bills basically.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember my manager came in, and I actually speak French. I'm Canadian, so I'm bilingual. And in Canada, if you're bilingual, it's really good for getting jobs.
Mm.
Even though I don't live in a French-speaking part of the country at all.
Yep.
So I was working at a call center, and I was doing French customer service. My manager came up and said, "Listen, you're gonna get moved to the night shift, and not like overnight, but it was like a late shift. Like
Yeah.
I'd get off at like 9 p.m. kind of deal." And I was like, I honestly, I was like, I didn't say it to her face because I'm not that kind of person, but I was kind of like, screw this. I thought about what to do. My wife said, you love learning and you love writing, so could you do something with that? And I started thinking about journalism, and the plan sort of came together that I would go back to school for journalism. So I went to a college in Kitchener-Waterloo called Conestoga College.
Okay.
But in the lead up to that, I wanted to write because I felt like writing was a thing that you just needed to do to get started. So I was really into this video game called Star Wars: The Old Republic.
Oh, I love the Old
Which
Republic. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great game. I mean, it's kind of it's old now, and they actually added some crazy good expansions recently. But anyways, at the time, it hadn't yet come out. It was about to come out, so I was writing. I just wrote a blog post today on my blog. I'm sure you can
Mm.
find it if you try hard enough.
All right. Search
And
Josh Burry, Knights of the Old Republic.
if you search my handle, actually, my handle Gauntlet comes from a talent in Star Wars: The Old Republic, which
Oh,
is
okay.
sort of why I kept it. There was a talent for the Sith Juggernaut class called Throne Gauntlet, and I know what a Throne Gauntlet is in like a uh, in the sense of like the expression of throwing down the gauntlet or
Yep.
whatever. But I liked the name of the talent so much that I was like, damn, I'm just gonna do this. So but yeah, so I was writing this blog. I applied for like a volunteer position at this website called Darth Hater, which was like a community website. It wasn't about actual hatred. It was just a joke on Darth Vader. And and I applied for this. It was just like a volunteer position. I knew I probably wasn't getting paid anything. When I got hired, they said, "Hey, you're probably not getting paid anything, but if we somehow find some money for it, we'll throw some money your way as like an honorarium kind of dealio."
Mm-hmm.
I was fine with it. Um, I actually eventually did get paid a little bit of money for my writing, but I was just doing like roundup posts of cool content that was being created in the community, a little bit of PvP stuff. And then before that kind of ran out, because the website was owned by Curse, and they were like, we're not paying anybody to do this. But I ended up going to college, and once I got there, I discovered that journalism was something that I really wanted to do. It wasn't just like the writing part. It was it was interesting to have like an avenue where you need to learn, you need to be curious, but you also want to write, and you want to write in a precise way. You can't just kind of go off and say whatever you want, because that has potential legal ramifications, as well as it could hurt people, right? You don't want to hurt somebody's career or whatnot. So I went to college. I did well, I guess. And after I got out, or during actually my education, I managed to get like a part-time gig at a local newspaper. I was doing copy editing there, so just looking for errors. It was mostly line edits, so it's not like I was like researching and stuff. Although if a fact looked way out of whack, I would check it. And then while I was working there, I finished school. I was only working part-time. I eventually worked part-time at a cafeteria or a cafe, like a coffee place as well. And I was trying to figure out like where to go from here, because it didn't really look like the part-time thing that I had would ever become full-time. I was watching the destruction of local journalism as well. And this is somebody that anybody who's worked in a newsroom in the past 10 years could tell you this.
Yep, absolutely.
That the Record, which is the paper that I worked at, I have nothing but kind words for everybody that I worked with there, truthfully. But I mean, they were going through some lean times, and they were trying to figure out how to make the local newspaper model work.
Because I'm assuming they were print, which is just got beat up bad.
Oh yeah. I mean, there were people there. There were photos on the wall in that office that were taken, developed, and won awards before I was born. Like it was serious.
Super
like it was a local institution for sure, and they still exist. I don't know exactly what the arrangement is for them now, but the paper still exists. But I mean, I was watching people like lose jobs, etc., and I sort of knew that couldn't be my immediate sort of jump. Like getting promoted or being full-time or anything, it didn't seem like it was going to happen. So I started thinking about things that I did like, and maybe I could break in there. I saw a note about a local Heroes of the Storm team. That was participating in this competition called Heroes of the Dorm, which is a collegiate tournament. This is something that your previous guest and I both have in common.
Okay.
An interest in Heroes of the Storm. So I just pitched it. I looked and said, who would be interested in this? I saw this little company called theScore, which, I mean, they weren't really a little company, but they had recently started an esports division. And so I just pitched them an article. I said, like, listen, I've made contact with these people on this team. They're a local team for a local university. I think it would be a cool story. They get free college tuition or university tuition if they win. So it's pretty cool. And I noticed that you don't have any Heroes content on your website, really. So maybe this would be a way to like start doing some of that. And they paid me for it. They said, yeah, sure. This is, what's your rate? We talked about it, and I got paid to write the article, and it was really fun. And I said, hey, like, why don't I write more hero stuff for you guys? And we just see where it goes. They were cool with it, so I freelanced for a bit, desperately hoping to get hired full time, and eventually that did happen. And it actually, I think it happened 5 years to the day today.
Really? Congratulations.
I think I got a notification on my Facebook feed or something.
Cool.
So, yeah, so I was over the moon. I was primarily writing about Heroes of the Storm, news writing primarily, so player transfers, results, etc., all these things. And that was pretty much what I did, to be honest, for I guess 2 years at least. Yeah, 2 years. I was just writing about Heroes of the Storm pretty much. I would write other news if it came up. So if there was like a league player transfer, I would potentially write that. but my primary thing was just Heroes of the Storm, and it was pretty hype. I don't know how many other people were getting paid like full time to write about Heroes of the Storm at the time.
Right.
There might be some other people, but I was pretty much I was doing features, like written features. This was all print stuff at this point. And it was great. I had so much fun. I got to go to BlizzCon a couple times for my job, which
Super
was
jealous.
extremely. I had never been. I'd always wanted to go,
Yeah.
and I will say it's a little bit different when you're working.
Oh, absolutely. I worked
yeah,
on IPL back in the day for IGN, so yeah, it was
Right.
very different working it than going.
Yeah. You still see people that you like or you met in the community, and
Yep.
obviously you get to hang out and stuff. But when you're on deadline for all sorts of things, it's not just a vacation. Basically, is what I'm trying to say.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
it was still super fun. And if you've never been to BlizzCon and been in the audience right as they announce everything at the beginning, it's like so hype.
Oh,
It's so much fun. If you like Blizzard stuff, if you don't like Blizzard stuff, you'd probably be like, whatever.
right.
I happen to. So
Okay, so I want to take something you said and back up
yeah.
for a minute, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah,
had talked
absolutely.
about pitching this, and
Mhm.
I know like a big thing for me. Again, I'm not a writer, so I'm thinking in a different context. But like, what do you do to prepare a pitch? How do you make a pitch? And like, what was that process like? Who do you contact? Who do you send it to, et cetera? So if you wouldn't mind, just walk like a little bit through that process for us, and if you could say what was probably the best part of your pitch, do you think, and what was the worst part? So I know there's like 8 questions, but
yeah, I'm trying to remember. I like don't clearly remember
that's
my
okay
whole
then.
pitch.
Yeah.
But I will say that when you want to pitch something, there's a few things that you want to keep in mind. So obviously who you're pitching it to. So I have people, like, even though I'm not like technically an employee of theScore right now, I'm a freelancer. I have people come to me all the time and say like, hey, like I want to write this article. I think theScore would be interested in it. It would be about this and this and this, blah blah blah. Well, the first thing you want to do is make sure that the entity to which you're trying to pitch is an entity that would do the thing that you want to do. And in theScore's case, they haven't done any substantial written stuff in a while. They're almost entirely video, right? They just do video content on YouTube because that's the direction they've chosen to take the company.
Yeah.
And so if you come to me and you're like, I want to write a written feature about this player, they're just not gonna, no matter how good the pitch is, right? Like they're just not. It's not what they do right now.
Yep.
So they're not gonna do it. So make sure you're pitching it to somebody, to an entity or whatever that would actually run that kind of content.
So understand the company and the structure that you're going to. Don't just ask anybody.
Yeah, for sure. And that's just generally a good tip anytime you're working with a company that you want to work with, whether it's freelancing or full time. Like if you go into an interview with theScore, for example, you want to know like what their major video series are, right?
Yep.
Like if you walk into that interview and you don't know about any of them, and I don't know, maybe they might ask you to pitch something. I don't know. I'm not saying that definitely happens, but I think it could happen.
Yeah.
You want to know what those are because you want to know that whatever content you're proposing fits well with that entity. So that's a really key thing. Like you need to know what it is that they're doing.
I don't mean to put words in your mouth here, but it's almost like you need to understand what they value and then bring something that increases the value of what they're doing.
Yeah. I mean, definitely you don't want to like the one thing I will say is sometimes with like when I first pitched theScore, it was pretty early into their esports sort of like program, like the division. Really, there's a whole division that's just esports, right? They have a sports division as well, but so it was pretty early on. I had no idea if they wanted to do Heroes of the Storm content. Truthfully, I didn't know.
Yeah.
But it looked feasible, so I went for it. In terms of who to pitch to, if you feel comfortable approaching other people at the company who work for that company, that's a great way. I know it seems a little bit informal. You can be polite about it. You can say, "Hey, I'm sorry if I've wasted your time. I'm sorry," or whatever. And most people are willing to help you. I think there are a lot of people who are willing to come out and at least point you in the right direction. You know what I'm saying? Whether or not they're able to make your pitch go all the way, I mean, that's a whole other thing. But I do think that most people will try and help you get to the right person. Websites, Twitter, like these are things that, like, I think for me are a little bit, like, to me they're a little obvious because when you're a journalist and you're like trying to like look up a story, you hit social media like right away. You're like, oh, where's their LinkedIn? Where's their Twitter? Like, who is this person? What,
Yep.
like, who is the person at this company who would be best able to respond to my inquiry or whatever? Like if you're trying to get an esports org, maybe you're trying to interview one of the players on Vitality, maybe, let's say, for no reason at all. You would look at what the Vitality account follows. I'm sure they follow all their employees or most of them. So you can maybe get an idea of who to contact. They all have their emails in their bio too.
I noticed that a lot do. Yeah, for business inquiries, send here.
Yeah, so you definitely want to use the resources that you have at your disposal, and this is not like, this is just using things that are public information, so nobody should feel bad about this. This is like, if somebody puts their email in their bio for business inquiries, then I mean, ensure that your inquiry is a business inquiry they would deal with. But there you go.
Yep.
That's a great way to find a contact email if you don't want to approach somebody who works in the company already. And then the other thing is, and this was taught to me in school. So I'm passing this on, I guess, as a little thing, is
Yeah.
I was always taught, I had a magazine writing course, which was kind of like a feature writing course more than, because I mean, I guess in hindsight, calling it a magazine writing course when magazines are also going through struggles is maybe not the best thing, but it was really a feature writing course. And they always said, when you're pitching something, make sure that the person you're pitching to knows that you're the best person to write this. And I think that's a really key thing to keep in mind. I've heard horror stories, not in the esports scene, mind you, so whatever, but I've heard horror stories about people pitching something and the pitch gets declined, and then like 4 weeks later, there's that feature that you pitched, right?
Yep.
And I'm not going to say that this is widespread. I truthfully don't know how widespread it is, so who knows, but you want to ensure that when you make that initial pitch, that you have, like, make sure that you are able to do the thing and that you're the best person to do it. So when I sent that pitch, I had already made contact with the captain of the team to speak with them and ensure that they were good for an interview.
Did a little legwork even beforehand.
You probably do want to do a little legwork. Now, having said that, if you're trying to make a living out of this sort of thing, there's probably a limited amount of legwork you can do before you pitch something, because you've got to eat. Like, you can't put in 20 hours of work, get a pitch together, and then, oh, whoops, nobody wants to buy that. Well, that's a problem, right? You just did a bunch of work for no reason. So, but you definitely want to ensure that you are the best person to do it. And in a certain sense, that means believing in yourself as well. I know that that's kind of cliche, but you have to come to the table and be confident in your ability to write the piece. And yeah, like I said, maybe do a little bit of legwork, because like, you also wouldn't want to pitch something like, if I pitched that story and they were like, yeah, this sounds great, here's the amount we're going to pay you, your due date is this date, and then I go to the guy and he's like, no, screw you, dude, I don't want to talk about it. And then you're like, well, how am I going to do this now? Right? Like, how am I going to write this if the pitch was an interview with this esports team and I can't get the interview? That's a problem. So
now, you talked about having a blog earlier. How do you see a blog as an avenue for someone to start writing that wants to get into esports? And maybe your answer is it's not. I don't know.
I would say it's probably purely as like a showcase, which is sort of how I used mine. I think it would be hard in today's day and age to like create a blog that becomes so popular that you can like run ad revenue and just like live like that. That's pretty difficult. And there are some blogs, like there's actually a blog in Canada called Canada Land. They deal almost entirely with Canadian politics, but they're pretty much independent as far as I'm aware, and like they just do very good investigative work. That's probably not the best avenue for somebody who's just getting into the industry. So I would say if you do decide to make a blog, it's probably purely as a showcase for your own abilities, but also as a way to hone your own abilities, which is for me, I just wrote a post every day. That's what I did. And not everybody can commit to that, and I totally get that. But during that period before I got hired, I guess, because I wasn't really getting paid, but hired by Darth Hader, I just wrote a blog post every day. I went on some podcasts, none of which are around anymore. Rest in peace. But I want just things like that, just to try and get your name out there. Try and get, like, you want to have work that you can show to people.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? Like, if you pitch, it's possible the editor will come back and say, listen, we like the pitch. Can you show us some other examples of your work? And it's pretty hard to to get published just doing like you just getting published the first time is kind of difficult.
Yep.
Because you know, they're taking a chance on you. I mean, there's all sorts of examples in games journalism even of, well, we trusted this guy and it turned out he plagiarized this whole review. You know what I'm saying? Like that's happened.
Oh,
So
yeah.
so people are like companies are taking a chance on you when they put you on their site. And so you want to have some work that you can point to, even if it's just a blog post, like write about something you're passionate about, you know? Like if you're really passionate about World of Warcraft, just you can write about that. And like there have been bloggers like who worked for like community sites who've been hired by Blizzard. Like they've been hired by Blizzard. Maybe that's not your ultimate goal. That's totally cool, but
Yep.
write about something that you can every day you can be like, yes, I want to write a post about this. It doesn't have to be a novel every day, but just something. Like just hone it, especially if you don't have any formal writing training at all. Like if you don't have any sort of like education that in journalism or in writing, like you got to work on it. It's not something that comes naturally. You do have to work on it. I'm not saying it's rocket science because it's not, but you need to train. It's just like shooting a jump shot. It's repetition, right? Like you got to just get out there and do it. Nobody is born Steph Curry without ever shooting. Like you need to learn to do it. So
it's really made me think about a like a vlog, I guess you'd call it. I'm not really sure what you'd call it, but Chase Jarvis is a really famous photographer, and he does these interviews that are amazing on YouTube with basically really successful people in different fields. And he was interviewing the guy who did he was the publicist for Tucker Max's book. I don't know if you ever remember Tucker Max.
I do.
Yeah. So, you know, not the greatest guy in the world, but he talks about the problems with like Tucker Max and publicizing all this stuff. And basically he knocked it out of the park for like $100. And so people were like really blown away with what he did. But anyways, long story short, this guy said, say yes to every opportunity you get and then make sure you do it the best you absolutely can. And that's the kind of thing that will get you noticed by people is when you continuously put out good work, when you have high standards and you're doing that. And I, just like what you were talking about there really reminded me of that, of say yes, take opportunities, but don't screw them up. Like don't be the guy who plagiarized the opportunity he was given and then you can't get anything.
Yeah, I mean that's the key thing too, right? Is not biting off more than you can chew. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be ambitious in your projects, but yeah, no, like if you say, yeah, I'm gonna do this interview, I'll have it to you by this day, and you just can't, it's late. That's a problem. And
right, it's better to be honest up front. Like say, hey man, I'm sorry, I'm not gonna get it out by Monday. I got something going on. I know Monday's my usual day. It's gonna be Tuesday. Like I feel like that's better than go, oh, it's gonna be Monday. Yeah, and then Monday comes around like, oh man, you know, it's gonna be Tuesday. Like if you knew it was gonna be Tuesday, just say Tuesday.
Yeah, and that like writing on deadline is another skill, and
I bet.
Like self-starting, like motivating yourself to just do things, that's a whole other skill, and it's not something. I mean, you can kind of train it on your own when you're not working for sure. Like you could set your own deadline for doing a bigger project and work towards it, but yeah, it's something that you just kind of have to roll with the punches when it comes to deadlines. But obviously, if you have an opportunity, don't overpromise, because you want to be able to fulfill whatever it is that that you say you're going to do.
Yep. A buddy of mine always says under promise and over deliver.
Yeah, it makes sense. And you want to be, you want to be that person who is on time and is consistent. That's a thing that companies value very much, very, very much. Being able to just, yes, it's going to be by this date, and it's going to be the same quality or better maybe than I normally write. And yeah, I mean that's really important. You don't want to like go in there and say like, yeah, I'm going to write a script and it's going to be 6,000 words and I'm going to have it to you by Thursday or what. Like that's a problem too.
Yeah,
that's a huge problem.
So when you think about, again, someone who's trying to get into this, trying to get started, would you say it's more important for someone to have the video game / industry knowledge, or is it better for someone to have the technical knowledge?
I'm not sure if I call it technical knowledge necessarily.
Okay.
I guess it depends. It depends. It could be technical knowledge. You're right. Like if you're doing video editing, I'd say that's technical knowledge for sure.
Okay.
But yeah, I think that having the the actual like the writing experience or the editing experience is probably more useful than having like an immediate passion for the game, but having both would be obviously the best. That
Right.
that would be the best case scenario. And like I said, writing is something that anyone can learn. Like it's if you speak a language and you know that language, you can learn to write in a pleasing way in that language.
You might second guess that if you see some of my writing.
Well, I mean, we all learn and develop as writers, and many of us don't use that at all. Right? That's like besides maybe like tweeting or
Right.
you know you Instagram or something. Like a lot of us don't use writing on a regular basis at all. But once you get into the habit of doing it, it will develop as a skill set.
Mhm.
A great thing is if you have somebody editing your work, and this is like I mean, if you're a full-time employee and you're writing journalism, there's going to be somebody editing your work. Those people can be incredibly valuable to helping you develop as a writer. The feedback that you get from editors, even if they're just copy editors, like you can get a lot. You can get a lot, and that's important as well. But it's difficult when you're starting out. If you can find a mentor in the space who's willing to like read, or
Mhm.
even just somebody else that like a friend who's willing to read it and give you feedback, that can be super helpful as well. But I mean, all this to say, I think that the writing part, like, I think most companies, if you were like, I have 6 years of writing experience, but I have no esports experience versus the opposite, it's a lot harder to give someone a job if they don't have a skill set right now that's
Mhm.
usable. We can teach people about esports, like, and that involves less personal initiative from the person, although obviously if you want to learn about esports and you dive into it, that helps a lot. But if you have no video editing skills, or you have no writing skills, or you have no on-camera experience at all,
Mhm.
and you love esports, it's a lot harder to find somebody who's going to like kind of take a chance on that,
Right.
because you don't have like something to point to, like a body of work that you can point to and say like, this is what I do. I want to do this, but in esports. So that'd be my advice. If you have a passion for esports right now, like if you really want to work in esports, then the next step is to find out what you want to do in esports, and that entails figuring out like, do I want to edit video? Do I want to do voiceover?
Mhm.
That's the next step. And once you understand that step, you can start working on those skills, or maybe several of those skills. Maybe
Yep.
I, I, like when I pick up the threads of where my career went, I had to do a bunch of stuff I had no idea how to do. To be honest, I was just kind of thrust into it because I was brought up in a journalism program that was primarily print based. We did do some broadcast stuff and
Oh,
some
okay.
video editing stuff,
Yep.
but it was focused more towards print because that's what I thought I wanted to do.
Mhm.
The reality of of the industry kind
Yeah.
of changed the course of my career a little bit, but
Right.
um, not in a bad way. I love what I do, so
Yeah.
it's all.
So one of the things that we talked real briefly about, and this is coming into developing your writing, developing your body of work, is you had talked about one of the best compliments somebody could give you is that if they didn't follow a certain game you were writing about, but loved what you wrote because they loved the story throughout it and how it gripped them. So if you don't mind, tell me a little bit more about that, and then how would you suggest people developing their ability to tell story and not just write?
So what I had said previously was that I love it when I see that comment, the idea that like I don't even follow this game, but the story was so good I was hooked.
Yeah.
And the reason I like that is because I think what it tells you as a writer is that you harnessed that person's story in a way that was understandable to a layperson in the game. Like you got to the essence of what that person's story was. Like
Mm.
you were really able to boil it down and make it compelling to somebody who doesn't know anything about Tekken in that particular example.
Yeah.
And so to do that, you need to do more than just like write a series of results that that person put up, right? Like you can't just talk about, oh, well then they play second, and oh, then they went out in groups at this tournament, and like you have to be able to identify narrative trends in the person's story. And for me, I just write an outline. So I think about what's happened in this person's career. You still think about what's happened in their career. It just isn't the bulk of what you write about. You have to put it into a structure where the viewer feels like they're experiencing a story, right? And this can be kind of tricky because, I mean, time is a linear thing, but narratively, you don't have to stick to that. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you watch The Last Dance, you can jump around in time. You know, if like about Michael Jordan, if you aren't familiar with that, viewers, it's on Netflix.
I've heard about it. I actually don't have Netflix, so I haven't seen it.
Okay, yeah. So basically, it jumps around chronologically.
Yeah.
It's not like
It's not a
okay,
linear
we start
story.
here and
It's
then, yeah. So that's something you could think about, but also like you don't have to spend the same amount of time on every part of a person's career either. You some parts of their career, maybe it was business as usual for them. They were kind of putting up their usual results. Maybe there's a period of time where they win everything. They're winning so much, but you don't need to talk about literally every result during that period of time. There are other ways to talk about it. You can talk about their dominance. You could list off some of the big events they won. I think I wrote Story of Glaive, and once Astralis becomes this huge powerhouse, I kind of skipped over literally every event that they won. I point out the big ones, I point out the Grand Slam, but it's not really interesting to be like, then they won this event, then they won this event, then they won this event. It's like the viewer doesn't want to hear a list of events that they could read on Liquipedia or whatever that they won.
Yep.
Like the viewer is not super interested in that. You need to just, what you do is you look at those results on Liquipedia or whatever site you're using, you look at them and you say, okay, they were dominant during this period of time. We need to show that to the viewer. We don't need to just tell them. We need to show it to them. And of course, I'm talking about video writing specifically in case that wasn't evident by this point. So
yeah, I do want to come to that too. Again, I told them earlier I have a bad memory when we're like in the heat of this stuff. Is I did want to talk a little bit about print writing versus video writing eventually to see if you've done any of that. That's sidebar. But again, sorry to interrupt. But I was thinking while you're talking about this and like the story and the narrative. I don't know if they talk about this in journalism. I remember some of my friends in college who studied literature. They would say like there's only actually like 7 stories and they're all retold the same way, or something along those lines. Are you familiar with that idea, and how do you feel about that with writing?
I am familiar with it. It wasn't something like so because my college education was all journalism focused.
Yeah.
There was less of that, to be honest.
Yep.
But I had a feature writing class. I think feature writing is about as close to like narrative writing. Well, it is narrative writing, really. I think it's narrative writing. But yeah, I don't know if I totally agree with it. I mean, I think it's kind of true in a sense if you boil things down to the point where distinguishing characteristics become completely blurry, right? But I think you can sort of do that with anything, right? Like
Absolutely.
you could be like, there's only one kind of flag, right? And people be like, oh well, but what? There's like all these different. You're like, oh well, they all are like a piece of fabric.
They're all
or
cloth.
like
they're almost all square. They're
Yeah.
like 3 colors. You have like a few
or it's
variations
like,
on it.
It's like horoscopes too. Like people are like they're so vague because the intent is for you to like imprint your own ideas and feelings and your like current reality onto the words, right? So they're intentionally extremely vague most of the time.
Yep.
Like so that you'll like hopefully be like, yeah, that's right. I got a friend who's a Leo and he's really going through, so it's kind of like I agree that there are like narrative structures that are common for sure.
Yep.
I don't know if I'm like super comfortable being like there's only 7.
Right.
Like there's only this amount. So
okay, so how do you balance? Because this is I've actually thought about this recently. I'm a voracious reader, but I hate writing. And so one of the things that I've noticed recently is that I don't like when an author gives me too much detail because I'm not engaging my imagination. And so I wonder, how does that play into esports writing, or something like that? Does it play into esports writing? Do you find yourself, because as you talk about the story, the narrative, are you creating opportunity for people to fill in some of the gaps, or is this something where you want to be really concrete?
I think it's a little bit different. Like when I'm talking about video.
Okay.
Because in video, and this was the thing I had to learn once I started doing it, I was very tempted to describe everything. But if you can just show it to the viewer, that's oftentimes more effective.
It's
Now,
like a
having
movie.
said that, yeah, exactly, yeah.
Hmm.
But unfortunately, you can't show everything to the viewer. There are things that it's almost impossible to depict in a visual way, or like the footage just doesn't exist. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
it doesn't exist, so you can't show it. So there are definitely challenges there, but for me, like talking about over describing things, one of the biggest challenges I've had as a video writer is I like see footage. I'm like, this is perfect for this. This is perfect for this section, but I like preempt it. You know what I'm saying? So like the narration right before the clip gives away too much about the clip,
Yes, right.
and that's a thing that if you're writing for like a visual medium, it's like really important to like think about what sort of feeling am I setting up for the viewer going into this piece of footage, and like how do I want them to to absorb it. And if you say like, oh yeah, such and such player went to this tournament and he got demolished, and then you play a clip of them getting demolished, well, the viewer already knows what's happening.
Right.
The viewer knows they lost. It's not that compelling, right? And it might otherwise be extremely compelling footage. It might be a super close match in Tekken, and they're like, oh god, what's gonna happen? And it's like final round or whatever. Like that was for me a big thing, is like knowing when to say less and show more. And what you're saying before you show is something that helps the viewer sort of. Oftentimes it's like mentality stuff, or it's like we're talking about the person's journey to this point, setting it up for this moment. That was the most difficult thing for me. I love this. I would probably be a writer that you wouldn't like, because when I wrote written features,
Yeah.
I loved describing moments. Not like I'm not like talking like J.R.R. Tolkien, like this is the kind of tree that they passed on their
Yep.
way to Bree or whatever. But like, uh, I wrote a feature about a Heroes of the Storm player named Shot.
Hmm.
He was a member of a Heroes of the Dorm winning team, so he won his college was free. He it was good.
Yep.
And there's footage, and at the time I wasn't writing for video because we weren't really doing much video in the sort of vein that we do now.
Yeah.
But there's a moment in the footage where he's standing on stage, and he sort of like it all sort of hits him that he's won,
Mm.
and he like breaks down on the stage. And for me that was like such a powerful moment that I felt like I had to describe it. So I did my best. I'm sure somebody could find the
Yeah.
feature somewhere. But yeah, like you're right. So video is a completely different medium, and like so often there is footage that will say it better than you can.
Right.
And so it's about knowing when to like let the viewer watch, and knowing when you have info to add that it improves that experience, I think.
So you have been bringing up Tekken with this a little bit too, and I don't follow Tekken much. I have a friend who's really good at Tekken. We're a bit older, so we missed kind of like the coming up in the FGC fighting game community, for those of you who don't know. And I mean, he was really good at any. We went to a D2 school that's fairly large in Michigan, and he went undefeated on campus. Like nobody even ever came close to him. You know, so he was decent, and so I like Tekken because of him. I learned a lot about Tekken. But I've recently heard about this story about this kid from Pakistan who showed up in the Tekken scene and won, I think, a fairly large tournament. And I thought it was just really cool hearing about it. I haven't dove real deep, but it's going back to what JC, my previous guest, was talking about, is like how powerful story is and how you need to tell the story of people, I think, to really engage people.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
I think about that even more so in video.
yeah, well, speaking of Tekken, I'm like I came up in the FGC. Just I went to a few locals. I went to a bigger local tournament that was called Toryukin, and it was like way back when it started. It's held in Toronto. But I had always liked fighting games. I don't consider myself necessarily like part of the FGC because I don't really stay up to date in terms of playing any of these games. I love to watch them though.
Yeah.
Maybe that's an okay bar. I'm not trying to gatekeep people out of the FGC. That's not what I meant. But like I like played a lot of Street Fighter growing up. I played a lot, especially Street Fighter 3 Third Strike. My brother was super big into it, way more than me.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 2009, when Street Fighter 4 came out, it was very big for fighting games.
I actually even bought it.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people did, and my community, where I live, Hamilton, Ontario, there were like locals that sprung up. There was like There were a number of video game stores that were like used sort of retro stores that had arcade cabinets.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was like a good amount of activity around here, and I was always interested in it. I was never like a big player or anything, but I really liked fighting games, and so fighting games have always been something that I liked. But Tekken is not a game that I ever really encountered until Tekken 7 really blew up, and
Okay.
then we started writing about it because of the hard work of some people, honestly. Like I could probably mention Daniel Rosen, who works at theScore. He's been a huge advocate for fighting game coverage. But the question always is like, is anybody going to watch this, right?
Mm.
Like when we're talking about video. Thankfully, I think that theScore and Dan have done a great job just bringing the essence of the story to the viewers, so that yeah, maybe you don't watch Tekken, but this is the story of a human being who played Tekken. So if you get the human part of it right, then we're not, this isn't a video about all the different combos you can do with
Right.
Brian Fury, right? This isn't a video about the intricacies of Tekken's combat system and like how mids work as opposed to highs, right?
Yep.
This isn't a video about talking about every result that a player has ever had. So it's approachable for that reason, right? Like if you want a video about combos or something, there are people who do that, and that's great. I'm glad they do that. But like it's just not what we're aiming to do. So I'm like I would say that in terms of fighting games, the thing I love most from a narrative perspective is it's almost always one person against one person.
Mm.
So from and this is I think why StarCraft was, this is a reason that StarCraft was so interesting. It's not the only reason, obviously, but like when you are just sitting across from one person and it's a struggle between you and them, and in many it's a primarily mental struggle, right? Like to try and figure out what the best approach is, and to try and predict them, and maybe even program them, like condition them to do things when you do things. I think that is incredible.
Yeah, that
And
happens
the
a
player,
lot in FGC.
yes, and the player you talked about, who I'm assuming is probably Arslan Ash from Pakistan,
Oh, yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
is
Mm-hmm.
he obviously, his story is incredible. theScore's done a video about it, which I think is very good. But he's also a prominent figure in a recent video I did, which is the story of Nee. And in that instance, Nee is the hardened veteran who's been playing Tekken for a long time, and Arslan is the new guy, right? So even in that sense, I think that maybe this is a nice cue for people who aren't into video writing. The same person can be a sort of a different personage in multiple videos, right? Like in Arslan's a hero of his own
So you
video.
could be like the
Obviously,
heel and the face, depending upon who you're
yeah,
highlighting.
yeah. Well, at the very least, he's a challenge for Nee. Like,
Yeah.
like he's an obstacle for Nee. And in his own story, obviously, he's the protagonist.
Yep.
He's the hero. So I think that's an interesting way to look at it
Mm.
too. And I actually had somebody I mean, Nee's career is so long that I couldn't, I'm working with a word limit, and we're not trying to do hour-long videos either,
Yeah.
right? But if somebody's like, oh, you should have talked about his rival or the series he had with Anakin. It was so sick. And it's like, I want to, trust me. But maybe I'm not promising anything here, because nothing, I'm literally promising nothing, but
Yeah.
maybe I want to do that Anakin story on its own, right? Maybe I want a story about Anakin, and Nee is an impediment in Anakin's story because he's like the established, elder statesman of Tekken, and Anakin he's American, and Koreans and Japanese
typically dominate Tekken. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like about it, part of it is about thinking it in that way, like how do these pieces fit together, instead of like what happened, okay, then what happened, okay, then what happened, because there's parts of the story that simply have to be skipped over. In the event of in the case of Nee, when I wrote that script, I mean, his early career, like, good luck getting the footage. Like, we found there's some footage out there, but there's no tournaments, right? Like, it's Korea. It's Korea in 2006.
And there wasn't a lot of streaming. There wasn't a lot of recording. It was just like some dudes talking in the basement, like, oh, did you hear about, what happened? And yeah.
And Korea was maybe better than many countries at recording gameplay. So there is gameplay that exists, but I'm just saying, like, you can't talk about what tournaments Nee won in 2006, because besides the ones that people have talked about, which are minor tournaments held in an arcade between the best Korean players, basically, there's no like there's no production. Like it's some guys playing on a head-to-head setup in the Green Arcade in Korea. You can't spend 20 minutes on that. I mean, if you want to interview literally everybody who was there and get verbal accounts of it, you could do a whole video about that.
Right.
But if you want to do a video about Knee's life, you can't. You just
Right.
can't. It's a challenge that you just have to be like, establish that he's the best in Korea at that point, which he firmly does, and I think the video does a good job of that. And then you got to move on. So there are a lot of challenges with esports specifically because footage in some cases is like non-existent, or like record keeping is bad. There are tournaments that happen that there's not like a lot of records. Honestly, there are fan sites for Tekken that have been following competitive Tekken forever, and in some cases they were the greatest source of information right in that script. So hey, keep going. Like, people who are just enthusiasts about esports, who are just following it, maybe you're doing work for future people too. I mean, we do document and make copies and stuff of everything now, and streaming, and there's VODs of everything, but those guys kept it alive. They kept part of Tekken alive in their own way. So it was pretty cool.
When you're talking about telling the story from like a different perspective, it made me think about, I think it was Mother Teresa. Somebody fact check me and get this right, but I think Mother Teresa said that she would never go to an anti-war rally, but she'll show up to a pro-peace rally. And so it's like how you frame the same idea can really impact the message, or like how it's received.
But yeah, that's definitely true. But I think we should also acknowledge that the same event is automatically framed differently by different people as well.
Oh, I'm sure that's true. Yeah.
So it's not so much that we're being dishonest by choosing a particular framing of an event. I'm not saying you're implying that, but I just want to say.
Oh, I didn't take it personal. You're fine.
Yeah. It's not that we're like being dishonest or we're like bending the truth, but like somebody interpreted it that way.
Yeah.
Right? Like when in that Knee story that I was talking about, he eventually does go to Pakistan because Arslan is so good.
Oh,
and
really?
Like, it's just, yes, and it's standard fighting, which is pretty anime, honestly. But it's standard fighting game sort of like wisdom that if you're really good,
show up on their home
playing
turf
against the best. Yeah, like you played against good people. Like nobody comes out of like a town in Canada and goes to Evo and just wins it right away, because you need to play against the best players.
Yep.
You need to like play against the absolute best to understand where you're lacking and where you can improve. If like your example, at your college, your friend's playing all these people, well, clearly none of them are going to win Evo for Tekken, right?
Yeah,
because he's trouncing them. Could your friend win Evo for Tekken? Probably
we don't
not
know, because he's never played the best.
Right. But yeah, exactly. Like you need to play with people who are like really good at the game if you want. So he goes to Pakistan, and that event, like thinking about it, there's this incredible footage. And honestly, if you have any interest in what I'm saying, I'll plug it at the end. But like,
plug it now. It's
the video. Right. Okay. Well, the video is a story of Knee, and I wrote it, and I got really passionate about this project in a way that I never thought I would, to be honest, when it was assigned to me. Because there's a moment when Knee goes to Pakistan, and he goes there right before the Tekken World Tour Finals in 2019. And he goes there because he wants to find out what made Arslan so strong, like what made him such an incredible player, because it wasn't just a surprise to Knee. Everyone was like, Pakistan, not exactly a prime Tekken country. Honestly, not. And this is nothing against Pakistan. I love the country and the fans. I mean, in terms of the like, I guess, tier 1 esports, there's not a lot of players from Pakistan right now. So he needed to find out what was going on in Pakistan. And when he shows up there, that moment of him showing up there, there's footage of him showing up. People are cheering for him. They gave him flowers.
Wow.
They are honoring the past of Tekken. So the people who are there who live in Pakistan and are part of that scene, for them, that moment is, wow, we've been acknowledged by this incredible player with a storied history in Tekken. And this is a big moment for our community. This is a big moment for our country, maybe like long term,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
I mean, even right now, Arslan is a beast, so it's a moment for Pakistan right now. I'll say it. That's a big
Yeah.
moment. For Nee, that moment is completely different. When Nee shows up in Pakistan, he's trying to learn what made them so strong, but he's also a guy who supported Tekken even when it was looking pretty bleak. Like he paid to run some tournaments. He played the game even when there was almost no money in it, right?
Yep.
Like mid 2000s era where you're just not making any money.
Yep.
So for him, it's a validation of everything he's done in a sense, right? Like it's the same thing. It's Nee showing up in Pakistan, but for people who are there living in Pakistan, it means something completely different to them than it does for Nee.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so it isn't. I don't think it's dishonest to be like to choose one framing over the
Yeah.
other in a specific narrative. And maybe we've done the story of Arslan Ash. I'm sure that there are more. Well, there's already a few Pakistani players that look like they could be like absolutely, or they are world class material. But maybe in a future story of about one of those players, that moment is in that story, but it's framed in a different way. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's completely honest. Still, like it's the same event. It just means
Yeah.
different things to different people. The
Absolutely.
key the key is figuring out what it means in the context that you're working in, which for me was Nee. So
Right.
yeah.
That is really cool. I love the way that you see story, and I love the way that you're able to take events and understand that because, like I said, I keep saying I'm not a good writer, and I think part of that is though is I don't see story really well. I have done some live commentating, and towards the end of it is when I really started to try to focus on story because before I was like just a play-by-play guy or just an analyst. Like that was my framework. Like that's all I could see is like let's talk about the problem going on for team X, or I'm doing play-by-play. And towards the end I said, oh, there's so much more to this. Okay, and
Yeah.
trying to get into that. So my story game is really weak, and so I love hearing you talk about this and like the way you frame it because I don't have that in me right now, and so I think it's so valuable.
I mean, it's something that took me a little while to get to, because like I said, when I started working for theScore, I was doing only print content.
Yeah,
I still got to do like I got to do features, and that was always my favorite part. So maybe it wasn't that surprising that in 2017 when they had me try my first script, which was kind of a departure for the company. Um, I actually loved it. It was terrifying, but I liked doing it. They gave me Daigo as my first script, and I
no
was so scared.
way.
I was so
I
terrified.
would be too. Like
Yeah,
again, I don't super follow the FGC, but I know who Daigo is. Like who doesn't know who?
yeah,
Like Daigo is it Daigo and Justin Wong and like the
yes.
longest like
Evo moment
rivalry
37.
in the yeah. It's like
Yeah, yeah. It was so scary, and I mean, there are definitely things I would do differently in that video. I think it kind of stands up, but like there are things I would do differently
yeah,
nowadays. And as soon as I got Nee, like Nee is like the Daigo of Tekken, right?
yeah,
So as soon as they were like, you're doing Nee, I was like, oh no, I was having flashbacks like, oh, it's like to me it's kind of a burden, right? To
yeah.
like tell someone's story in a way that is accurate and narratively interesting and
Hmm.
does justice to the person's career as well, because I don't have an unlimited amount of time. There have been some excellent long form pieces that have been done on players in all sorts of esports, like I'm talking like 50 plus minutes.
Yeah,
I don't have that option,
right.
unfortunately. So I had to, you know I had to crunch it in there. I had to work within my given limits, and that can also be a challenge. I mean, that's another part of any kind of writing
Yeah,
is you have to be typically a certain amount of brief. You're not given like unlimited words
yep.
or unlimited time, and so you have to give the viewer or the reader the essence of what the story is. And you can maybe go back. I mean, I would like to go back and do another Daigo video, to be honest. We have done that for some, like we did a second Faker video
Mm.
because of when the first Faker video was done. um we did a second one that's like a follow-up basically. I would love to do another Daigo one, but I mean, it kind of depends on what happens with Daigo's career, right? That's the other thing, is like you can't control
Yep.
Like if Daigo retires tomorrow, do I get to do another Daigo video? I don't know. I got to
Right.
look exactly what's happened
Yep.
between the last one and this one, right? So, yeah, it was super scary when they gave me the Daigo one, and you don't want to like, I don't know how to phrase this. You want to do it justice.
Yeah.
You want that person watching the video to walk away from it and feel like they understand at least like the core elements of that person's career and their story. And you don't want to like,
You don't want to
you
dishonor
don't want
them.
to exactly. Well, I mean that's another reason why it was so shocking to have Daigo as my first script. Was
Yeah.
like I had a certain amount of reverence for him as a player. It's less, and it's because I did, you know, I followed the FGC a bit, and I liked fighting games growing up, and so it's less like a professional sort of respect for the person, and it's more like this person is like this person's like a celebrity to me, and, you know, so that's also another thing that
Yeah.
you have to overcome, right? Like if you're interviewing somebody who you've watched that highlight, that Evo moment 37, like
Yep.
as a kid over and over again. And I didn't interview Daigo, so it wasn't a problem there. But you know, you gotta keep it professional. You gotta keep
Yep.
it cool. So
I just wanted to say something because you said like you maybe would go back. You hope your video stands up. So you know, this might be off-putting to some people, but whatever. I was a youth pastor for a few years, and so you know, like you're having very intimate relationships with kids and like their parents, and you're kind of getting to know them. And at the end of my time at this church, the one of the fathers said, you know, how do you feel about your time here? And I said, well, you know, I mean, honestly, there's things I'd do differently, and I feel really bad about that. Like I felt really bad about some of the things that happened. Like it was nothing terrible. It was just like, oh, I should have put more effort into this, or I should have like, you know, hung out with this one kid more because he was having a hard time, or you know, and he said, I'm really good to hear that because if you would do nothing different, you didn't grow. And I was like, whoa. And it like hearing that from a parent, I was like, whoa, okay. Like that just completely reframed how I interact with that feeling, because I've had that feeling a lot. And so I say all that because like I think that's great. You know, as your first video, looking back, hopefully there was something you would change, because that means you've grown a lot as a writer and somebody who's producing content.
yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I'm sort of, when it comes to my own work, I'm like very critical.
I tend to be too.
I try not to read comments that are too critical on my YouTube videos, but you know, if a video is doing well, I want to soak it in a little bit, to be honest. I maybe that's vain, but I like getting feedback from people, to be honest, more than just like, you know, getting some, I don't know, some adoration or what. I don't really want that. Like ultimately, like I said, it's like the people who are like, I don't watch Tekken, this video had me hooked, or like, this is the most intense story of you've done yet, or something. Like those kind of comments to me, they keep me going, because not really because it's like, oh well, this is it, this is like the best thing. It's because like if I feel good about it and there are other people who are like, yes, this was like a good video, then it means that I'm kind of on the right track, that I can like kind of keep pushing forward and trying to develop as a writer, and trying to get to the essence of these stories. Because and this is like a sort of a cliche thing that I repeat to people. But it's, for me, it's like very true. There's great stories like everywhere in esports.
Yes.
Every esport, there's incredible stories, and I want to tell all those stories if possible. But you know, it's not every esport is built the same. But if I can sort of get people on board with like, hey, yeah, you didn't watch Tekken, but you like this video, then I can start to do those things. You know what I'm saying? Like if I see a great story in Rocket League, or I see a great story in any other fighting games that are even smaller than Tekken, because Tekken is actually quite popular right now. It's had a huge resurgence.
It has, yeah. Again, I follow FGC a little bit. Like I remember games like Skullgirls that had like a real strong following, you know, in the competitive FGC, and yeah, like there's all these little games, like even Dive Kick had like a pretty good following there for a while, you know. And there's so much more to the FGC specifically, kind of, you know, calling it out. But I mean, I guess even in first-person shooters, you have it a little bit too. Like Rogue Company, technically a third-person shooter, like just went into beta, but it's already hitting the map pretty hard. and there's like a lot of people talking about it. There's a lot of buzz on Twitter. Maybe that's just who I follow, but I was really surprised how much I've been seeing people talk about it. And so there's I think a lot of times people just get stuck on the idea of like they have to do League of Legends or like CS:GO, or like
Yeah.
there's so much more out there. Not that those games are bad, but there's so
So
much more out there.
so the challenge is really, I think, and this is my own personal opinion, and
Yeah.
it's not like business procedures or anything at theScore as far as I'm aware. So my own personal opinion is that it's really hard to tell an obscure story when your viewership doesn't, like, they don't trust you to tell that story yet.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, if you, like, a good example is, I don't know how active you are on YouTube. I watch way too much YouTube, truthfully, and there's a lot of content creators that I follow because I liked a video that they did, and I thought, wow, this is pretty interesting. So I follow them. But their next video is about something that I like. Look at the title, I look at the thumbnail, and I'm like, I'm not super jazzed about that. I'm not gonna watch. I'm just gonna skip this one or whatever.
Yep.
Sometimes you come back to those content creators, and sometimes you don't. Truthfully, like, sometimes it's, you like that one video, and then you can't. The next one is like maybe not your thing, and you sort of just kind of fall off the wagon a little bit. They're not part of like the routine of people that you
Yep.
follow anymore and that you watch. And if you don't have like a following of people who are like, yes, tell me a story about Rocket League, or tell me a story about Guilty Gear or King of Fighters, even though I don't play those games, I'm interested. Like, if you're telling the story, I kind of trust you a little bit to make sure this is an interesting story.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have that following, it's super hard. So it's understandable that a lot of people are like, let's do some League stuff, let's do some CS stuff.
Yep.
Because those are big things that the search engine, the algorithm, and YouTube will get people to them if they click League videos or click CS videos, right?
Yep.
So I understand it, and but the goal for me, like the real goal, is get to a point where people trust you no matter what. I mean, like, look at like ESPN 30 for 30, right?
Yeah.
A lot of those stories, they're about stuff that I wouldn't care about at all.
Yep.
I wouldn't care about it. It's a sport that I don't follow. It's a person I've never heard of. But there's a certain amount of cultural cachet, basically. You're like, well, these people tell some pretty great stories, so sure, I'll try it. Why not? I'll give it a
it's
shot.
like
I
they
trust these
have
people.
man, like a relation. No, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a reputational equity with you.
Yeah,
that
I think so.
They're able to cash in on something that maybe wouldn't have hit if it was the first experience or something.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of media outlets that build that sort of relationship with viewers, and then they're able to talk about whatever. There's plenty of media critic YouTubers who are very much the same way. Like, I mean, I won't mention any by name, but few of the ones I follow, they like did things about cats, and I'm like, I wasn't gonna watch Cats even as a meme. Like, even as a meme, I wasn't gonna go see the movie Cats. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But they did a video on it, and I watched it. It was like 45 minutes, I think, and I watched the whole thing.
Yep.
And at the end of it, I was like, I'm entertained. I will probably never watch the movie Cats, but
I actually watched a
awesome.
meme video on Cats also. Like, have no interest in seeing it. Yeah, I don't remember who did it, but it was just like they were basically spoofing it about how bad it was. But
yeah, I just think that that's sort of the goal, right? Is you need to build that trust from your audience, that they're like, okay, well, if you're telling this story, I know it's going to be badass, and so I'll give it a shot. And yeah, that's what I love about the job, is getting to just tell all of these different stories about different people in different esports. I have my favorites. I love fighting games. I mean, we haven't written any Heroes of the Storm videos, but I mean, hell, I'd love to do that someday. It doesn't seem very likely given how Heroes esports is right
the state
now.
of it, the state of the game, unfortunately.
But we all have our favorites at the office, but we're not always writing about our favorite esport. That's just not the way it works, right? Like, early days, I was doing all Heroes stuff, but once we went over to video, that wasn't an option anymore. It was like, here are the people we're going to be writing about.
Yep.
And you need to be able to bring your A game to that too. If you're writing about, you're writing about perks or whatever, and maybe you don't follow EU LCS, you need to be able to bring your A game to that video. It doesn't matter that maybe you don't follow it as much as a different scene, or maybe it's not your favorite esport. And that too is like, that's why it's so much better to be in the mindset of, what is the story here? Because it lets you grapple with all of these things, right? Even if you don't, even if you didn't watch literally every video that Perks did for G2 Esports' content team, right? Like you can still go in there and look at his journey and be like, this guy changed League of Legends the moment he stepped into the BEULCS slash now LEC. You can see that, and then you write about it, and it's fun. It's super fun, and that's why I keep doing it, to be honest.
So you talk about like doing your best and always bringing your A game. Can you tell me how, like the team you're working with for a specific video, how does that affect what you bring them? And I don't mean just in quality. Like, I don't know if this is true. So maybe you're saying, hey, no, you're thinking about this all wrong. But my thought is, like, depending upon the person who's in front of the camera, depending upon like the person who, like, the creative director behind the video or whoever that is, like, one guy probably likes something a little bit different. Like, one person might like humor more, one person might like stats more. Like, does that change how you write? Is that, like, how does that affect it? And then how do you then approach that, having to write slightly different styles but then still be you?
Yeah, that's difficult for sure. Like I've only talked about the narrative sort of story of series that theScore does mostly in my writing, but I was the host and writer for an extended period of time on a series that was literally just about memes, like internet memes, like
Okay.
that we did for theScore. It was super fun. I had a lot of people who were very passionate about the videos, which I greatly I value that. I think it's awesome that people like them. But that's a different context. I mean, you're gonna make jokes, you're gonna put in weird clips, you're gonna the tone is lighter, the tone
Mm-hmm.
is more conversational, the tone is I mean, it's more like what you'd see from a typical, like if story of is 30 for 30 tone, then that series was like, I don't know, like your favorite dank YouTuber. I don't know. Like it's pretty much, it was a different tone, and writing for different tones is a challenge. A lot of the time, the best thing you can do is if you're in that situation where you're writing something for a very specific tone, like it's supposed to be heartfelt and like light, and or it's supposed to be funny and dank or whatever, is like talk to, if it's a series as a producer or there's somebody else who writes for, talk to them, get an idea, watch videos that are in that series if they exist. Like if you're not talking about a series that hasn't
Mm-hmm.
been done yet,
Right.
like watch the content and really kind of get an idea for what they're going for. But nobody's going to knock it out of the park the first time. I don't think I did. And we had other people write that series, and like, you know, there's a learning curve, and that's totally fine. You know, I think, but consuming the videos that exist already, or talking with the person who has the vision, if they have like a producer, like you said, like a
Yeah.
creative director or whatever it is, talk with those people and really get a feel for it, because it can be difficult. I mean, I think the story of tone comes very naturally to me because I've written for that series for like over 3 years now, or almost 3 years now, so it very natural to me. I mean, I think anybody who's watched our videos understand the tone of those videos. They're serious. We want there to be intense moments. We want you to care about the person. We're okay to get emotional if there are emotional moments, kind of situation.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a challenge.
Because the
And
big fear for me is I don't want to look like a noob. You know, when I'm coming into
yes,
something new, I'm afraid that by me asking a question for clarification, they're going to go, why did we have this guy? Like, you know, you need to already know this. But from what I'm hearing you
yeah.
say, that's not really the case. You know, asking for clarification helps more than hurts.
I would say so. And the only other thing is, like, if we're talking about a freelance pitch situation, definitely do as much, like go in and watch videos in that series, or like look at the content, the written content on their website,
Mm-hmm.
to get an idea of the tone. Sometimes you're writing something where your tone is acceptable no matter what.
Right.
Like if you're doing an op-ed or something, right? Like your tone is what is wanted in that
Yeah.
scenario. And some writers that truthfully have become very popular on the internet, their tone is like very sarcastic and irreverent or whatever, and we like them for that, you know?
Mm.
Like a lot of the former Deadspin employees, those people all had very unique tones to their writing, and people valued that. That's what they liked about the site. They didn't like the name Deadspin. They liked the people writing for Deadspin. That's what
Right.
they liked. So yeah, it is a challenge if you're pitching something. You can usually set your own tone, like if it's like a written thing and you're like, I'm doing this feature about this Heroes of the Storm team, and you know they're just a bunch of goofballs basically, and they have to get off class to play this game, but they want to win a free college tuition. You kind of help get to set the tone, establish the tone for the piece.
Yeah.
Or maybe you don't have a clear idea of what it is yet, but once you start talking to them, it will reveal itself. That's also a possibility, and you should allow for that in your writing. Like you definitely want to have ideas about what it is you're writing, but once you go into it, like don't be so set on something that it absolutely has to be that, unless your boss says that it absolutely has to be.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yep.
like allow yourself to learn and for the plan to change if it makes sense for it to change. I think that if you refuse to kind of see what's in front of you, you're just kind of putting up obstacles for yourself in terms of writing the best possible piece.
Yeah. Hey, I want to double check how you doing on time. I know you said you don't have anything hard set, but I want to make sure to.
Yeah, I could probably do like another 20 minutes, no problem.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure
whatever length you want.
No, big thing for me is I want to respect people's time. I mean, both people who are watching and most importantly you. I think I told you I got a 4-month-old. He's asleep, so now it's like heyday here. So.
Yeah, it's probably a good time. It's nice that it lined up actually for you, since I know sleep can be a little problematic at that age.
Yes.
I've been through that.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I wanted to ask is kind of what you were talking about in the last little bit. So I don't know if you want to do this like by percentage or like how you would answer this, but what would you say, like, do you come to the table and say, hey, I have this idea, and they go, great, let's make a video? Or do they say, hey, we have a video we need you to write?
That's very workplace dependent, to be honest. Or at least I don't have like a huge sample of different workplaces where I've been doing this work, so I'm assuming. But there have been times where I was like, hey, I think we should try this. Like we have pitch meetings, so stuff gets pitched. We talk it over as a group, and that's another thing. That unfortunately, if you're just trying to get into the scene, it's a little bit more difficult to find feedback on ideas, because it's incalculable how important having feedback is when you're writing. If you're an editor, you're like helping to improve this person's skills in a very direct way. But even just having a meeting about a topic that it will be written and getting other people's opinions and bouncing things off of them, that's like super important if you want to create a quality script that really addresses the most important points, because we also all have our own preconceived ideas about things,
right?
But they're not always correct, or sometimes it's like, that is a good point, that's a cool thing that happened, but what if we like focus more on this angle, or we emphasize these points of the story or whatever. And so like having other people to do that with, that's like really key in my opinion. It will make you a better writer. If you're looking for like getting a mentor in the space, or like even just like I said, having a friend or something, if you don't have like a steady job already doing this thing, and so you don't have an editor, that is a big help. Those people, or even like, you know what, you're like, I want to write something about Flash. I want to write something about Flash, legendary StarCraft player. Well, find somebody who knows things about Flash. Like talk about Flash with someone, and you'll find yourself working through the story elements, and maybe you'll see a pattern like, oh damn, that's crazy that he like, this is like just an example, but oh man, he went out in grand finals like twice against this player. Is there a pattern of him struggling against this player?
Yep.
Or what was it about that? Is there a pattern that isn't the player? Is it like a certain build order or something? I'm just, these are just examples. I'm not. So yeah, I think it is very workplace dependent though. Like I've definitely had scripts where it's just like, we'd like you to do this topic. Okay, that's what I get paid to do. But there's definitely the opportunity. I've had many opportunities to pitch my own ideas, and we've done several of them. Particularly, I guess I would point out that I was always very much in favor of expanding our horizons in terms of games. So Rainbow Six Siege, for example, which has really taken off, I think.
Yeah, I think it's growing quite a bit right now.
Yeah, I saw that. I think it was the Esports Observer. They do like an index of like esports games by impact, and I think they recently moved Rainbow Six Siege up to the highest tier. So I don't know the exact criteria they use for that. So big asterisk on that one. But
Yeah.
I thought that was great, and I was very much pushing hard as somebody who likes Rainbow Six Siege. I was pushing hard for a while for us to try the content.
Yep.
Let's try Rainbow Six. It does great on YouTube. Like, let's give it a shot. We'll really tell a great story here, and hopefully our viewers will be down to join us, even if they don't play Rainbow Six. Well, it worked out okay. I mean, I wasn't the only one pushing for it, so I'm not going to claim like full responsibility.
Yeah.
But I think that that's an example of a time where I was able to be like, let's try this, and that's always me. Like, when I'm in these pitch meetings, let's try and do this story. I know it's a little bit weirder than what we usually do. There are many of my coworkers who are the same way. They want to kind of push the boundaries of what it is that we do, and I think we're at that point where, you know, we're seeing those videos get a pretty warm reception, and we want to keep doing it. So there's nothing wrong with pushing the boundaries or having a favorite game that you want to see better represented. It's just make sure that you like. I really want to do a HOTS video. I don't know if we'll ever do one. It's, for me, it's a huge passion project. I loved the game. I love the community. I feel like the game was good. It had its own good niche. Unfortunately, it was a pretty flooded market for titles in the MOBA genre.
Its timing was not good.
The timing wasn't good. It also, no items is like, okay, I'm okay with that, but like, people just inherently see it as baby's first MOBA as a result, and that optics problem never went away, even though the games were hyped. Like, the competitive scene was so good, great personalities, great rivalries, betrayal, like all sorts of great stuff. Like, maybe betrayal's a strong word, but I'm being it's a narrative flourish. So yeah, all this to say, I think it's a mix of, you know, we want to produce this video, we'd like you to write it, and also I am open to be able to pitch stuff, but you got to be able to sell it, right? I mean, it's not a freelance pitch in the same way that it was before I was hired, but I got to come in there with like a decent idea, and I need to be able to explain why it's a sick story that we should do and that our viewers will care about. If I can't quite do that yet, then maybe back to the drawing board until next time, I guess.
Yep. Last question for you, so that way we can wrap up a little bit early and give you some time back for your family. So, if you could give any advice to yourself when you were like in your 20s, you know, so you now giving your 20-year-old self advice, what would that advice be to get into this industry?
I'm worried that you don't think I'm in my 20s.
Didn't you say you're the same age as me? Isn't that what you said?
You're actually older than I am.
Oh, my apologies.
By a few years, but it's all good. Only by a few. It was a joke. It was a bad joke. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't. You know, I heard you ask this. You asked this question on the previous episode.
I did. Right? It's a question I really like because I think it's one thing to say what advice would you give to a stranger, but what advice would you give to yourself? I think that's a weird twist to it.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the Back to the Future movies, and in those films, they talk about how you shouldn't encounter your past self because it could like irrevocably change the space-time continuum.
Yeah,
I'm actually pretty happy with how everything turned out, to be honest. So
I actually really love that answer because I'm a big believer that like I am exactly where I'm at now because of everything that happened before. And so, like you said, like who knows where I would be if, you know, that one thing with IGN went slightly different. Like, would I even be married to my wife now? Would it, you know, or like, because I think I told you off recording that like it was around that time where it was like, okay, do I continue pursuing this stuff? Do I not? Like, we're getting close to getting married. Like, I need to get a real job. Like, it could have completely changed things. And, you know, maybe I had to work 70% away from home, and she's like, hey, it's kind of a deal breaker for me. You know, I don't know.
Yeah, I guess for me it's like, could I have done things like somewhat better if I like could I optimize my speed run of Josh's life? Yeah, probably. I probably could. And if I had a time machine and the willingness to do it, I probably could like make it somewhat better, or like get into my position somewhat faster, or like I could go back and tell myself not to do print stuff. Don't do print journalism, I guess, because, you know, even though I had some broadcast training, and honestly, thank God for that. And most journalism programs now are entirely multimedia.
Yeah.
Like just
Mhm.
because of that, because it's like, even if you're a print journalist, like even if you're working at a newspaper and you're writing articles every day, you are probably shooting your own photos or video,
Yep.
depending on what you're doing.
And maybe doing
Um,
some post.
you might have to do stuff in post too.
Yeah.
So maybe I wouldn't have taken print, but also I think I wouldn't. In a sense, I don't think it's really urgent for me to change anything. I feel like I didn't make any like insanely glaring errors. Maybe the one thing I would tell myself is just to like I really don't like it. Like it took me a while to get over like people just posting things on my video that were like very poorly formed pieces of criticism
Uh,
that where I felt like kind of like it was a personal attack, I
yeah.
guess. And it took me a little while to sort of just understand the healthiest way for me to deal with that. And for the most part, it's just I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
I guess like I try
You
and
got a
take the
harder
good
shell.
stuff. Yeah, exactly. Like I try and take the good stuff. If there's criticism that I feel is like constructive and like does speak to something in the piece, then I will internalize that if I agree with them. But for the most part, I mean, there's plenty of haters. There's people who, and I'm not even, I'm very much like not a super well-known person because I pretty much just write now. So I don't get it very badly. I know there are like people who are way bigger in the industry than me who get just criticism from every side for everything they do, and it's like tiring. And I think if you take literally all of that to heart, it's going to be a hard time for you. Like
Yeah.
you're not going to be able to like if you just inject that directly into your bloodstream, it's not going to be a healthy result. So you shouldn't do that. And maybe I could have told myself that back then, or just to get more multimedia skills.
Yeah.
I I hesitate to even say this because I'm afraid somebody might find it, but I actually I actually experimented with video editing while I was writing my Star Wars: The Old Republic blog. I made a couple of PvP guides,
Mm.
and they're really bad. The audio quality is brutal, and the editing is terrible. And maybe I could have learned from that when I made it and been like, you need to like actually learn how to do this. Like you need to like not just mess around in Sony Vegas until it kind of looks like a video. Like you need to learn something about editing because that's still a skill set I don't have. I don't edit video. I write the video. There's somebody else who edits it.
Mm-hmm.
I have ideas about how I would like it to be edited, obviously, because I'm
Mm.
also talking about what's on screen and whatnot.
Yep.
But I'm not a pro at it. So a lot of the times I have to defer to the expertise of the person who is editing the video. I have no problems doing that, but I'd also like to be able to express myself a little bit more clearly, I think, when I'm talking about editing a video. So maybe just
Yeah.
if I have to answer something,
Yeah.
then I would answer really pushing the multimedia angle because you don't know where your career is going to go. Like I said, I started as writing print news about Heroes of the Storm, doing features, and then 2017 we want you to start writing video scripts. We want you to primarily start doing that. We want you to host this show. We want you to do voiceover. We want you to host this help host this podcast and run the audio for it, which I was very bad at. And apologies if anybody sees any of those podcasts. So yeah, you don't know exactly where your career is going to go. So if you're talking about content creation, having a diverse skill set or the ability to say, you know what, I don't know exactly how to do what you're telling me at this moment, but I'm gonna learn it. Like I'm gonna figure it out.
Yep.
And that is important. Like the ability to change and whatnot is super important. I feel like maybe I didn't totally understand that when I chose print journalism, but thankfully I was able to adapt on the fly, I guess.
So for like a little bit of an echo of what you're saying, there's a really good book called Creativity Inc. And it follows like the story of Pixar and how Pixar developed their culture. And he talks a lot about having open, clear criticism and how important that was for them to grow as a company because it made all of their content so much better when they got good criticism. So I just want to echo that. And then I'm going to wrap up. So I really appreciate your time, Josh. That was really insightful. I learned a lot. It was a lot of fun. I hope you had a little bit of fun at least. And I really, really appreciate your time. And
no problem.
because, I know I'm starting out. And so there was not a whole lot of benefit for you coming on here. So I mean, I think this speaks a lot to who you are as a person. So thank you so much. And as always, I let my guest have the final word. So feel free to end and promote, say hi, whatever, anything you'd like.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess first I just want to say that I did enjoy our talk, and I like to help. So I'm glad that maybe you know it. I hope that the series becomes huge and you're getting like crazy guests, but maybe you'll just like think about me. You know, you'd be like, oh yeah, that guy was there in the beginning before the big lights. You know, I'm just kidding, um, but yeah, I guess in terms of what I plug, like we've said here, I'm currently freelance. I'm not an employee of theScore, but I'm currently only writing for them. So you can check out my stuff on theScore Esports' YouTube channel. I've mostly been writing for Story of. My most recent project is the Story of Knee. I talked about it a little bit in this video. If you like what you heard, or you just want to get a bomb-ass story about the god of Tekken, and I do mean god, check it out. Story of Knee is the title. I think there's like a prefix on it. I think it's the man who perfected the world's hardest fighting game. I did not title that, so please do not attack me if you think a different fighting game is more difficult. I'm not even necessarily disagreeing with you that a different fighting game is more difficult, but I do think Tekken is really fucking hard. Yeah. So check out my my most recent video, Story of Knee. Follow me on Twitter at Throne Gauntlet. If you have questions about getting into the industry or whatnot, I'm happy to answer them. I can't always tell you that I'll answer them like immediately or whatnot, but I'm like happy to help anybody who just wants some advice or whatever. I think there's a lot of opportunities in esports that just aren't they're not being like filled necessarily. Like there's a lot of I think there's even more need for people who can do what I do or who can write excellent news copy. Like there's opportunities out there, and if you want to get into it and you need some help or whatever, I'm happy to like take a look or offer some advice. I can't like I said, I can't guarantee that I'll get back to you like immediately or that I can copy edit your work or anything, but I'd be happy to give any help that I can. And I don't know, crazy times out there right now, so please be nice to each other. Try and consider other people's points of view, and yeah, we're gonna get through this for sure. It's gonna be great.